Even President Johnson in 1966 or 67 was given a report by the American Scientific Council which said, "Dear Mr. President, if we carry on burning all the oil and coal in the ground, we're going to have climate change and it'll have catastrophic effects." 60 years ago.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Biomarket Insights TV. My name is Paul MacDonald and I'm delighted to be joined today by David Newman. David is the Managing Director of the BBIA, which is the Bio-Based and Biodegradable Industries Association. Hi David, how are you?
I'm fine, Paul. Nice to be with you. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for your time today. So listen, we've got loads of questions and interesting subjects from our community of global bioeconomy professionals to put to you today, ranging from the transition to a circular bioeconomy to the mission and vision of the BBI, through to the difference between biodegradable, compostable, bio-based, and any of the latest sort of bio-based innovations hitting the market in the future. So a lot to cover, but first of all, you've worked in the environmental sector for many years, a very, very diverse career. So tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, how it all started, and the journey that has seen you today head up the BBIA.
Oh, well, thanks, Paul, for the opportunity. I've been doing this for a long time because I'm old, so it's a long journey. But I started in the late 1980s. Supporting Greenpeace, being a volunteer, working with the founder of Greenpeace, running Greenpeace in Italy for a few years, then in local government, then as Minister of Environment advisor in Italy. And I got by chance involved in the setting up of the new consortium in Italy for composting and biogas, which at the end of the 90s wasn't an industry. It was a dream. And by the time I'd left in 2015 as after South Korea, is the system which worldwide per capita treats more food waste than any other country in the world. Italy treats and collects more food waste than the whole of the rest of the EU plus the UK. So a very successful and sophisticated system. And the whole waste system in Italy has been based upon resource recovery rather than, for example, as in other countries and as we're risking doing in the UK, on energy recovery and incineration. And one of the reasons I got into bioplastics is because recovering food waste, we realized you can't treat plastic. You need to have materials to carry food waste into treatment which mimic food waste, and so you need compostable materials. And so in 2011, we set up the Bioplastics Association in Italy. I founded and ran that for 4 years, and we did all the laws which introduced that certain waste streams had to be all compostable to give citizens the maximum chance of getting their food waste cleanly back to food waste treatment. The more opportunities you give, whether they're carrier bags, bin liners, fruit and vegetable bags, etc., then the more food waste you will get collected. And Italy's example and experience bears that out. 2015, I came for personal reasons back to the UK. We set up the BBIA together with a few of the people I've been working with in Italy, and today run that. And meantime, I've been, as a volunteer, more or less, president of the International Solid Waste Association for 4 years, and just until July this year, the World Biogas Association also for the last 4 years, promoting, again, the whole concept of waste management as being critical to our both our health as well as our environmental well-being.
Great. I mean, I've now got two questions in one, really, and part A is maybe a little bit simplistic, but part A is, what's inspired you over that 30-year career to basically dedicate yourself to the protection of the planet, and part B of the question is, I imagine that has to be pretty difficult at some stage. There will be people putting barriers in the way of progress. So, how have you managed to navigate some of those barriers and overcome some of those challenges, which I imagine must be one of the most frustrating parts of your role or your job?
I learned in the early days of Greenpeace that you have to pick your battles. you have to know that you stand a reasonably good chance of winning them. And therefore, the answer to your two questions really rolls into one, that what inspires me is the chance to actually have some success in the battles that you choose. The point about the frustration and overcoming the barriers is that you should not choose a battle which you stand no chance of winning, because then you're just going to be very, very frustrated. And so even the battles you choose to fight and you think you might win, of course, you may lose. And of course, there are barriers. Because when you transit from one system to another, someone's going to lose. And those who are going to lose are doing their doggiest to not lose. I remember, for example, I just give you two examples. The ozone layer. The chemical companies came to us in my office in Greenpeace in Rome and said, if we have to ban CFCs, it's going to be 2,000 people unemployed, and they'll have to shut the factory down. And we were going, yeah, but you've known about this for 25 years. And this stuff is destroying the ozone layer. So no, we're not going to lay off you. Actually, we occupied Parliament the next day, and we got the law through that Italy banned these. With every other country banned and voted for the Montreal Protocol. But those people were not really worried about the 2,000 workers who may or may not, by the way, did not lose their jobs. They were worried about shareholders' dividends. Full stop. And if you remember, you're too young probably to remember, but old people like me will remember that when we had petrol in our cars, before they were all electric, but they're not, of course, but we had lead in our petrol. And Mrs. Thatcher banned lead in petrol. No one would have thought Mrs. Thatcher was an environmental activist, but she banned it on health grounds. And, up until the day she actually said that's enough, the petrol companies would have had you believe that the world would come to an end if you took petrol, because it meant they had to invest a couple of billion to do it, and they didn't want to do that, and they wanted to prolong the argument as much as they possibly could to not have to invest that money. The day she banned it, they invested the money. It was all over in 5 minutes. No one noticed. And it's that sort of frustration which you come up against, and the only way you can fight that, Paul, is to be persistent with your messaging and to be consistent. Is to be there all the time. And it's damn hard work. And I would say to young people, if you want to do something for the environment, don't do what I do. It's not pleasant work. It's the lobbying part is hard. It's personal. Sometimes it's very personal, and it's very frustrating. And you get those adrenaline rushes occasionally when you've won that battle, but it may have taken you, like the battles we set out for BBIA, it will have taken us, by the time we've got the results, 7 years. Okay? 7 years. So, if you're looking for quick wins, forget it. But if you're looking to make a change that will have structural and systemic consequences for a long time, you have to be in it for the long term, and that's hard work.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many questions around that. But a really quick question that isn't planned, but how do you celebrate? After 7 years of blood, sweat, and tears, there must be a moment of euphoria.
I remember when I was in my early days in Greenpeace, part of the campaign to stop nuclear testing, and before that, part of the campaign to stop the slaughter of whales. And over nuclear testing, I don't think anybody celebrated. Everyone was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was absolutely wiped out. Over the end of whales, there's still some whaling going on, but compared to 25, 30 years ago, whaling has come to an end. Over the end of whales, there was a long and very, very long celebration. I only had a tiny, tiny, tiny little role in that. But I remember the guys who'd been working on that for 10, 15 years, they partied.
Oh, I mean, I can only imagine. So, and I suppose that previous sort of answer or conversation we just had leads us on a little bit to yesterday's IPCC report. I don't know whether you've had time to read all of it or just the exec summary or any. I guess I'm interested, what's your reaction to the report? And for me, what needs to be done to increase the speed and direction of travel? Because it always seems when these reports come out that it's, we need to act now. And then another report will come out a number of years down the line saying we need to act now. So, how do we increase our speed of travel?
I put out a message yesterday to say, can we not have any more reports, please? It's enough. We know all we need to know, and we've known it for at least since the Stern report in 2006. But before that, I mean, even President Johnson in 1966 or 67 was given a report by the American Scientific Council, which said, "Dear Mr. President, if we carry on burning all the oil and coal in the ground, we're going to have climate change. It'll have catastrophic effects." 60 years ago. I think Edward Teller, the Nobel Prize winner, spoke at the American Petroleum Institute 50th anniversary. I think it was 1953 or 55. And he said exactly the same thing. He said, burning all this. And even the head of ExxonMobil said, if we open up all those shale fields and start to extract shale gas and shale oil, this was back in the late 1970s, he said it's going to be a climate disaster. So is anybody actually surprised what the IPCC has said? I'm not. Mm. You've known, I mean, people like me, because we do this work, all this stuff for 20 years. And, the David McTaggart, who was one of the founders of Greenpeace, who died in 2001, and I worked for 13 years, said to me, he said to me in his very blunt Canadian way, he said, if you ain't sorted it out by 2020, Newman, you're all screwed. He said, I'll be dead by then. We didn't realize quite how quickly. But he said, but, you got to get it sorted out by 2020. Otherwise, it's too late. And so now we have seen that the IPCC, which I remind everybody is a collection of thousands of scientists from over 60 countries. And because it is a United Nations report, it needs unanimity to be published. This means that the report is actually minimal case, because it's got scientists in there from Saudi Arabia, from Russia, from Venezuela, from the United States, are all pushing back. So it is actually a best case scenario they are reporting on, minimal case scenarios. Probably a minority or majority of those scientists would have liked to have said things which are much more frightening. Mm-hmm. We're not able to. Okay, so we now know that sea levels are rising and it is irreversible. We now know that we are irreversibly into 1.5 degrees warming in the next decade or so. We now know that the myth of plus 2 degrees centigrade at 2100 is that legend. And we now have absolutely no gaps in the knowledge of the challenges we face. So the skeptics who have been out there, the anti-vaxxers of the climate change world have been out there for the last 30 years, can all frankly drop dead. I mean, they made me puke 20 years ago. I would strangle them personally now, because they have helped delay this and create this mess for the last 20 to 30 years, so that we are in the situation we're in. Every day passes, it becomes more and more difficult, more and more expensive to get it right. Mm. We know what we have to do. We know what we have to do. The solutions are financial, they're technological, and they're in behavior change. And all that's difficult. Do we really want to do it? Probably a lot of us actually don't really want to do it. It means you won't drive a car again. You'll use public transport. It means you won't fly unless it's on essential government business. It means that you'll get meat like my parents had when they were kids, twice a month. They were poor. It wasn't climate change.
Yeah.
And, it means that you will buy a new suit every 10 years, a pair of shoes every 5 years. You'll repair them. Now, do we really want that society? Of course we don't. Of course, the Bahoo kids who go out and buy 10 pound clothes, they don't want that type of society. Oh. But if you want to have a society which is inhabitable in 100 years' time, you've got to really make drastic changes.
Yeah. And what does the I suppose the bioeconomy, when we're looking at the BBIA, if we turn our attention to that, your strapline is advancing the UK circular bioeconomy. So I suppose, what role does the bioeconomy have to play as a contributing fixer, if you like, and for some of our viewers that aren't, don't really know much about the bioeconomy sector, can you explain a bit about it and how is it structured? How does it behave?
Well, the bioeconomy is a huge part of our existing economy. Okay, so it's already here, and we would know it in things like food or paper. These are essential parts of the bioeconomy. But whilst we've been producing paper, cutting down trees and making paper and growing things and eating them for a long time, technology now allows us to actually use plants to do other things which we were not able to do until the last decades. So you are now able to use plant-based renewable resources to make materials and products and chemicals, which can then be used in uses like, for example, fuels, lubricants, plastics, paints, and many other thousands of chemical uses, which frankly even I don't know, but from cosmetics to pharmaceuticals, etc., where you don't need any longer to extract gas or oil out of the ground. You do that with plants. Now, all these technologies are very, very rapidly developing. You're seeing the increasing use of biomass waste to do these things. You're seeing the increasing use of algae in the sea and the oceans to do some of these things. And all these things are really developing on the back of two pushes. The first push is to get away from fossil fuels, to get away from coal, oil, and gas, to get down the greenhouse gas impact of making these things. But the second push is that actually, and this is where the circularity of the bioeconomy comes in, because these materials come from natural sources, if they are made and designed right, they can go back to nature. So if you make a compostable plastic, it can be composted and put back to soil. If you make a biodegradable lubricant, which if it spills in a waterway or it spills in a field from a farmer's track, goes to soil and doesn't pollute. If you use, you're a farmer and you use films on your fields to grow your crops under, those black strips of what are called soil mulch. If you make those from soil biodegradable, renewable resources, they can soak into the soil and become a sort of fertilizer for the soil and compost naturally into the soil. So you can do these things now because technology allows you to do them. Okay, so the role of promoting these materials is that of the BBIA. It's about ensuring that people understand this. I don't know whether we do it well or whether we do it badly. We have a tiny budget, but we do our best. But to try to find areas where these materials can fit in and provide a better environmental outcome than existing materials. Now, this is not about substituting everything. This is about every plastic has got to be a bioplastic or every plastic's got to be compostable. This is about where these materials have a role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing contamination, reducing pollution, and making life simpler for everybody. Okay, so in plastics, that's 5% of plastics, maybe 7% of plastics. It's not 95% of plastics, it's a small fraction. And getting those niche uses can have, as we saw in Italy with food waste collections, bigger ramifications than the materials themselves. Because if your materials help a system work, the system is bigger than the materials.
Yeah.
It's like if you have an engine, you need lubricants in your engine, otherwise the engine will seize up. But the engine's that big, the lubricants are that much. So if you have the right lubricants, and a lot of these materials, I see them as lubricants, as a way of making systems work better. And that's what the bioeconomy is for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm talking to lots of biomaterial ingredient sort of chemical companies, and I was talking to, and the other thing is that, nobody's saying that this has to happen overnight, and nobody is saying that, there isn't this transition. I think it's very unrealistic to expect that to happen, especially with some of the huge companies. But I was talking to a big global brand the other day, and they were saying, for the last 4 years, we've concentrated on replacing virgin synthetics with recycled synthetics. The next 4 years, it's about bio-based synthetics, So it's that you're not going to go from, virgin to bio-based necessarily overnight, but sort of putting in place those changes, and that transition is hugely exciting. And some of the people I'm talking to, these scientists, are just coming up with amazing alternatives to fossil-based materials which we know are not sustainable.
Yeah. Listen, as I said earlier, this is about picking your battles and looking long term. This is going to take years. We started the BBIA in 2015. By 2024, one of our targets was 2015 was to have universal food waste collections. That was one of our policy objectives. Well, they start on January the 1st, 2024. That's 9 years. Okay, then have compostable bin liners for the food waste collections to make sure they're clean. Government has said they'll do that. Again, we started that work in 2018. By 2024, that's 6 years. Okay, so you have to look long term, and you have to look at systems. The problem with government policy is it looks at existing systems and thinks, what can I build within those? What can I do within those systems? How can I slightly modify those systems without too much disruption? That's the wrong way of looking at it. You have to look, as we are doing with electric cars. The government has got it right. We have to look at 2035 or whatever the date, I can't remember, they keep changing it, when we will have no more diesel and petrol cars on the road. Okay? So you've set down a 15, 20-year trajectory that the industry's got to get its head around. We've got to get the charging. We've got to get the right batteries, blah, blah, blah. But we know where we're going because we have a target. If the government did that sort of thing with certain aspects of the waste and the resource industry and the bioeconomy industries that I represent, it would all be that much easier because we would all have a target to work towards. At the moment, they, hear, we can't use compostable plastics, there's no infrastructure. That's wrong. There are 240 compost plants in the UK treating compostable waste every day. But my answer is, well, if it's not right, let's change it. If it's not right, there must be something wrong in the system, therefore. So what are we going to do? We're going to carry on using plastics and pollute our soils with plastics? No, we don't want to do that. Well, then let's try and sort it out. So you have to look long term. These time, and your industries, they have. I've been speaking to several brands over the summer, and they're saying the same thing. We will have compostable solutions on the market, ready for the market by 2024, because we'll have food waste collections coming in, and therefore we'll have presumably a route to collect those across the EU, across the UK. But they've known about compostables since decades. But now, at last, they're beginning to move. It takes time.
And so just a little bit more detail into the BBIA. So who are your members? What do you do for them or for the sort of wider community? What are you hoping? I think I know what you're hoping to achieve. How does it work?
Well, we're an association, Paul, and like all associations, we represent the interests of our members and try to improve their business. I'm the managing director of it and one of the founders of it. And, we have members from multinationals like BASF or the Sphere Group, which is the biggest packaging group in Europe, to Novamont, which is the biggest biopolymer producer perhaps in the world, certainly in Europe, down to, really small businesses, who are making packaging for their customers. And we also have other trade associations and agencies who are members. But it's a small association because this is a small industry. It's still a niche industry. We grow and we support ourselves with our membership fees and with some European Union money also, which we've got from research grants that we take part in research projects in the European Union. So that sort of, gives us a basic level of income. I personally also have income coming from other work which I do in Brussels, because I do similar work to that I do for the BBIA in another field in the European Union. And a lot of our members dedicate a lot of their volunteer time to help the association, to give advice and to represent the association. So, the aim is we started off with some objectives, policy objectives. We will have achieved them all, I think, by the end of next year. And the aim of the association is to make our members' businesses grow. Why? Because making their businesses grow is also beneficial for the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say to anybody watching this that isn't aware of the BBIA to go onto your website, because the sort of the learning resource center you've got there with some of the reports. I mean, you've got tens, if not hundreds, of really interesting, bio-based reports and white papers and trends and all of this sort of stuff. So it really is it's a fantastic sort of resource for I suppose, well, those that are in the sector and those that have heard about the sector, don't really understand it, but would really like to be, I think there's more people out there that would, maybe I'm naive, I think there are more people out there that would like to be using bio-based solutions to their existing infrastructure, but maybe don't really know where to turn. Yeah,
we've built up the library over the years, and yes, it is a good resource. A lot of people tell us that. We try to be also neutral in the sense that we put on there also reports which sometimes are not favourable to the economy, not favourable to biomaterials, because it's fair that people see everything. There are many voices, there are many discordant voices, but there are also many genuine voices who think that, for example, a lot of the environmental NGOs say, we don't want to substitute plastics with bioplastics. They don't understand the fundamental role in the decontamination of food waste systems which bioplastics offer. And this is because none of them have ever had any experience in doing any of that stuff. They read everything from books and reports and they think they're experts. They've never got their hands dirty. So we have reports from people like that as well, because it's valuable to be able to compare opinions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so listen, I think one sort of final question from me. I think at the start of this episode, you were mentioning quite a few different examples of where bio materials are used. So I suppose, what have you seen recently that puts a smile on your face or makes you a product or a person or a project, something that is really sort of inspired you?
I'll be quite honest with you, Paul. After the IPCC report, there's not much to smile about, because the pace of change is so slow. It's too slow, and the consequences of that slow pace of change have been spelt out in a very, very clear manner. So at the moment, there's not much to smile about. You can win your battles and you can achieve your goals, but in the bigger picture is that the oil companies, the petrol companies, the Saudi Arabians are doing what they want to do. And that is to drill every last molecule of hydrocarbons out of the soil, whether we burn to death or drown. They don't give a damn. So, excuse the sobering comment, but the reality of this is that unless we come together as a human race and decide that our survival is more important than the profits that we make today, there's not going to be a lot of us around in 100 or 200 years. That is, frankly, the truth. It's going to be a very inhospitable world in a couple of centuries' time. So, having said that, let's smile and let's say that there are huge amounts of innovation going on. This is a time when humanity has never, ever technologically evolved as fast as it is today. And so that is something to celebrate. I'm seeing this, as I say, particularly with the use of waste resources, waste biomasses to make materials. I'm involved in a project, for example, that uses the waste out of pasta and biscuit factories and to make the packaging for the pasta and biscuits. So it's a total circular economy, and that packaging can then go back to soil to help grow more grain to make the pasta. And you get it. So these sort of things. The holy grail of material production will, of course, be the production of materials from waste, whether that's bio or other wastes. And there's a lot of that going on, a lot of research going on. I think the use of the blue economy, the green economy for the harvesting of algae is potentially extremely interesting, both as a feedstock for animals and for humans, but also as a feedstock for materials. It's still early days. The use of insects, both as a feedstock for humans and for animal feed, is also very interesting. That you will have heard of the soldier fly story, and I think that is one where the potential is enormous. We have to get away from growing corn to feed animals. It's ridiculous. So firstly, we have to eat a lot less animals. But secondly, we have to feed them with feedstocks which are not destroying soils and not destroying our environment. And as we've been doing for the last 50 years. And I think that the use of insects is potentially very, 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 very interesting. The other thing which I'm interested in and curious is the rapid interest that there is in carbon farming and restoring organic carbon to soils. If we put back, there's dispute over the percentage, but roughly about 0.5% of organic carbon into soils every year, we can more or less sequester into the soil at a global level the amount of CO2 emissions which we're pumping out. The calculation's not quite right. The scientists listening here will say, no, he's got it wrong. But there is a 4,000 campaign from the United Nations that we're part of that promotes the locking in of carbon to soil. So that means lots of composting. That means agricultural techniques such as no-till. And it means complete 100% cover 365 days a year so that the farms are never bare, so that stops soil erosion, and etc. And all these things are being taken up very, very rapidly. Rapidly enough? No. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for that. And I think there wasn't a lot of positivity around yesterday when the IPCC report was published, and that was understandable. But I completely agree with you that we have to have realistic positivity, and the age of technology and hopefully a change in mindset and collaboration is going to move us in the right direction, maybe not as quick as we would both like, but in that right direction. So listen, David, I could speak to you for another 3 episodes back to back. You have got so much to talk about, but we should probably sort of wrap it up there. Any of our viewers out there that would like to be a guest of mine on Biomarket Insights TV, please feel free to contact me at paul@biomarketinsights.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. So David, listen, on behalf of myself And our global viewers, I just want to really thank you for your time, your honesty, your clarity. It's been absolutely brilliant, and I hope we can have you back on our channel sometime in the future. But for now, I'll just wish you a nice rest of the day.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to talk to you. All the best.
Pleasure. Cheers. Bye.